The Mercury Verado V12 600 is the most powerful production outboard you can buy right now, and it's rewriting everything we thought we knew about marine propulsion. 600 horsepower from 12 cylinders, quieter than engines half its size, fuel economy that seems impossible. But here's where things get interesting. This technological marvel that Mercury spent 5 years developing has a dark side owners are discovering the hard way. Mysterious steering failures. Oil leaks that'd make your mechanic weep. The V12's reputation isn't as spotless as that mirror finish cowling suggests. Today we're diving deep into what makes this engine both revolutionary and, for some, a very expensive gamble. Let me paint you a picture. It's February 11th, 2021, and the boating world is collectively losing its mind. Mercury Marine just dropped a video on Facebook announcing something nobody saw coming. Not a new V8, not an upgraded supercharger, a full-blown, honest-to-goodness V12 outboard engine. The world's first, by the way. 12 cylinders. 7.6 liters of displacement, 600 horsepower, on an outboard motor. Now, if you're thinking that sounds excessive, you're absolutely right. And that's exactly the point. See, Mercury didn't wake up one day and decide to build this thing for fun. They'd been watching the market evolve. Center console boats were getting bigger. Luxury cruisers were ditching inboard engines. Boat builders were slapping 4, 5, even 6 outboards on transoms just to get the power they needed. And there was a gap in the market. A big one, ever since Volvo Penta pulled the plug on 7 Marine's supercharged 627 horsepower monsters back in late 2020. The timing was perfect, almost suspiciously perfect. Mercury had been working on this engine for 5 years, investing over $1.5 billion in research and development since 2008. 5 years. That's longer than it takes to get a degree and figure out what you want to do with your life. They were playing the long game while everyone else was still trying to figure out how to squeeze more horses out of existing platforms. Here's where it gets really interesting. The V12 Verado isn't just a bigger engine, it's fundamentally different from anything that's come before it. This is a naturally aspirated quad-cam V12 with a narrow 64-degree bank angle, the kind of configuration you'd find in a Ferrari or Lamborghini, not hanging off the back of someone's fishing boat. No turbocharger. No supercharger, just 7.6 liters of displacement, making power the old-fashioned way. The engine stands vertically with the open V pointing backwards. Mercury essentially stacked 4 additional cylinders on top of their proven V8 platform. The result is surprisingly compact, maintaining the same basic footprint as their smaller engines. We're talking about an engine that's only 1 inch wider in mounting centers than a 400 horsepower Verado. 27 inches center to center, that's it. But here's the controversial bit that nobody talks about. At 1,260 pounds dry, this thing weighs as much as a small motorcycle. You need transom mounting bolts that are 13 inches long. 13 inches. Some boats need transoms that are 9 inches thick just to handle the structural loads. We're not talking about bolting on an engine here. We're talking about architectural engineering. Before we dive into the really juicy stuff about what boats are running these beasts and the problems owners are dealing with, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Now let's talk about the 2 features that make this engine genuinely revolutionary. First up is the 2-speed automatic transmission. Yes, you heard that right, an automatic transmission. On an outboard motor. This is an industry first, and it's not just a gimmick. Mercury partnered with ZF Marine, the German transmission wizards, to develop a wet clutch automatic with 2 gear sets. First gear is 2.97 to 1, second gear is 2.5 to 1. Why does this matter? Because it solves a problem that's plagued big outboards forever. You want low gearing to get heavy boats on plane quickly, but you also want taller gearing for efficient cruising. Usually you have to compromise. Not anymore. The V12 launches in first gear with all that torque, then seamlessly shifts to second gear once you're up and running. And here's the kicker, you can't even hear it shift. Journalists who tested these engines at Mercury's Lake X facility said they had to stare at the tachometer to catch the shift. No clunk, no jerk, just smooth hydraulic perfection. The second game changer is the steerable gearcase. This is wild. Every outboard motor you've ever seen steers by pivoting the entire engine. The whole 1,260 pounds turns left and right. Not the V12. The powerhead stays fixed, bolted solid to the transom. Only the lower unit turns. It's more like a stern drive than a traditional outboard. The steering range is 45 degrees from center, compared to 30 degrees on conventional outboards. That means tighter turns, better low-speed handling, and here's the beautiful part. You can space these engines closer together because they don't need clearance to swing. So who's brave enough, or wealthy enough, to bolt these monsters onto their boats? The list reads like a who's who of premium boat builders. Boston Whaler jumped in with their 420 Outrage, downsizing from quad 350s to just 3 V12s. The 42-foot Sea Ray SLX 400 Outboard went with twins. Formula Boats went all in with quads on their 500 Supersport crossover. Valhalla Boatworks put 4 on their V46 center console and watched it hit 75 miles per hour. Tiara Scout, MJM Yachts, everyone wanted a piece of this action. The configurations vary depending on the boat. Smaller boats in the 40-foot range typically run twins or triples. The big boys, we're talking about 50-foot plus center consoles and cruisers, those are running quads. Some crazy builds have even gone with 5 or 6 engines, which is just absurd, but also kind of awesome. Here's what's interesting about the economics. A single V12 retails for around $77,000. That sounds insane until you do the math. 4 Mercury 450R racing outboards to get 1,800 horsepower. That's going to run you about the same money, but with 3 V12s putting out the same 1,800 horses, you're saving the cost of one engine. Plus, you've got better fuel economy and less complexity. Suddenly that 77 grand doesn't seem quite so outrageous. Performance numbers are genuinely impressive. The Formula 500 SSC, weighing in at 47,000 pounds with quad V12s, hit 69 miles per hour and reached 20 miles per hour in under 8 seconds, on a boat that weighs as much as a loaded dump truck. The Valhalla V46 with quads topped out at 64 knots with 0 to 20 miles per hour in just 4.8 seconds. A Boston Whaler 420 Outrage with triples was hitting 55 knots while achieving nearly 400 nautical miles of range at cruise. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the 12-cylinder elephant on the transom. In August 2023, roughly 2.5 years after launch, Mercury issued a voluntary recall. The problem? A potentially faulting steering position sensor. When this sensor fails, the engine enters what Mercury calls Guardian mode. Sounds friendly, right? It's not. Guardian mode means reduced power and limited steering capability. On the water, while you're trying to get back to the dock. The recall affected both the V12 600 Verado recreational engines and the V12 500C Pro commercial versions. In Australia, about a dozen engines were affected. The UK issued product recall notices. The fix involved replacing the steering sensor and updating the propulsion software. Not exactly a quick 15-minute service appointment. But here's where it gets controversial. Online forums and owner groups paint a different picture than Mercury's official statements suggest. One owner on the Hull Truth forum reported having 4 V12s with ongoing issues including steering sensors, steering housing seals, and oil leaks. Multiple Mercury techs visited their boat more times than they could count. Another owner mentioned their boat being down for over 3 weeks with an undiagnosed issue that eventually required hauling the boat for further troubleshooting. Oil leaks seem to be a recurring theme. One owner mentioned problems with steering housing seals and oil leaking, issues that persisted even after recalls were completed. Here's the thing, on a conventional outboard, oil leaks are annoying but manageable. On a $77,000 V12 with a complex steerable gearcase and 2-speed transmission, they're a much bigger deal. There have been reports of engines losing all their oil and requiring complete replacement under warranty, overheating alarms at trolling speeds, false fault codes related to the joystick system that turned out to be installation issues rather than engine problems. One Tiara 48LE owner reported that one of the 3 brand new V12s was deemed defective within the first hour of operation. If you're finding this deep dive valuable and want to stay informed about the real-world performance of marine engines, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Have you seen these V12s in action? Do you know anyone running them? Let's talk in the comments, and stick around because we're about to compare these to the competition and see how Mercury really stacks up. Let's get real about where the V12 sits in the outboard pecking order. Before Mercury dropped this bomb, the high horsepower crown belonged to 7 Marine 627 horsepower supercharged monsters. Those were based on GM's LSA V8, the same engine in a Corvette ZR1, mounted horizontally with a supercharger whining away. They made massive power, sounded incredible, and cost upwards of $150,000 each. Then Volvo Penta bought 7 Marine in 2017, and by late 2020 they shut the whole operation down. Sustainability initiatives, they said. Focus on electric and hybrid, they said. Translation: the business case didn't work, and Mercury was about to eat their lunch anyway. That left Yamaha's XTO 425 as the most powerful mainstream production outboard. The XTO is a beast in its own right. 5.6-liter V8, 425 horses, naturally aspirated, built specifically for big offshore boats. It weighs 952 pounds, has integrated electric steering, and a massive gear case that can swing 17-inch props. Yamaha did their homework on this one. It's proven, reliable, and fishermen love it. But here's where the numbers tell the story. In testing, twin V12s delivered 20% better fuel economy at cruise than triple Yamaha 425s. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between making it to your destination and calling sea tow. At top speed, the fuel economy advantage jumps to 24%. The V12 is also substantially quieter. Mercury claims noise and vibration levels match their 300 horsepower V8 Verado, despite making double the power. Testing confirmed the V12 is about 30% quieter than competitive 425 horsepower engines. The advanced midsection mounting system isolates the powerhead so effectively that you can have a normal conversation at wide open throttle. Try that with most other outboards and you'll be shouting. Here are some nuggets that don't make it into the marketing materials, but matter to anyone actually operating these engines. Oil changes are every 200 hours instead of the usual 100. The cowl has a service hub that flips up with a button, revealing color-coded service points. You can check and add fuel, change the filter, and service the gear lube without taking the boat out of the water. The full cowl doesn't need to come off until the 1,000-hour or 5-year service mark. The engine runs on regular 87-octane fuel. In an era where premium fuel can be $1 more per gallon and you're burning several hundred gallons on a weekend trip, that adds up. The advanced range optimization system constantly adjusts fuel delivery for maximum efficiency. The props are custom counter-rotating designs, 4 blades up front and 3 blades behind. This setup virtually eliminates prop torque and steering pull. The gear case can turn 15 degrees farther than conventional outboards, making close-quarters maneuvering surprisingly easy despite the massive weight and power. The alternator is a 150 amp unit, double what most big outboards provide. On a modern luxury boat with multiple electronics, air conditioning, refrigeration, and entertainment systems, that kind of charging power is essential. Let's address something that's been whispered about in marina bars and boat shows, but rarely said out loud. Are these engines too complex for their own good? Think about it. You've got 12 cylinders instead of 8, which means more moving parts. A 2-speed automatic transmission with hydraulic clutches and electronic controls. A steerable gearcase with its own hydraulic system. Electronic throttle and shift. Joystick integration for up to 6 engines. Integrated power steering. Over 1,200 individual components, not counting the base engine. The first-generation Verados back in 2004 and 5 had issues with timing chains, bell cranks seizing, and lower units failing as power increased. Mercury sorted those out over time, but it took years and multiple revisions. The V12 is so new and so complex that we simply don't have enough long-term data yet. The engines that were delivered in spring 2021 are only about 4 years old now. We won't really know how these hold up until we've got engines with 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 hours on them being beaten on by charter captains and commercial operators. Mercury has a good track record of standing behind their products. Warranty support seems solid, and they've been proactive about the recalls. But here's the reality. If something goes wrong with a steerable gearcase or that 2-speed transmission, you're not fixing it with a YouTube video and a set of wrenches from Harbor Freight. You need factory-trained technicians, specialized tools, and diagnostic equipment. Not every marina has that capability, especially in more remote cruising areas. Here's some speculation that's probably going to come true. Mercury has a pattern. They release a naturally aspirated Verado. A few years later, Mercury Racing drops a supercharged version with significantly more power. The V8 went from 300 horsepower Verado to 450 horsepower 450R. If history repeats, we should see a supercharged V12 from Mercury Racing sometime in the next year or two. Industry insiders are predicting 750 horsepower. Some think they might push it to 800. Imagine quad 800 horsepower outboards on a center console. That's 3,200 horsepower. That's legitimate insanity, but someone will do it because this is America and we have a constitutional right to excessive horsepower. The naturally aspirated V12 already makes 600 horses. Add a supercharger, bump up the compression, tune the fuel system, and 750 is absolutely achievable. That would put Mercury back in the sole possession of the high horsepower crown, with nobody even close. Yamaha would need to respond with something bigger than the XTO. Suzuki and Honda would be so far behind they'd need binoculars to see the leaders. It would be Mercury's market to dominate. If you're in the market for a boat that needs this kind of power, you've probably already made your decision based on factors that have nothing to do with this video. You're choosing between twin V12s or triple 450s or quad 400s. And you're looking at total package costs, fuel economy projections, dealer support in your area, and whether the boat manufacturer has a good relationship with Mercury. But let's say you're considering used. Maybe there's a boat on the market with 2 or 3 year old V12s and you're wondering if it's worth the risk. Here's my take. If the engines have had the recall work done, if they're being serviced at regular intervals by qualified techs, and if the boat has service records showing everything's been maintained properly, they're probably fine. The issues we've discussed seem to be early teething problems that Mercury is addressing. The fundamental design is sound, and the performance numbers speak for themselves. On the flip side, if you're looking at a boat with V12s that's been sitting, that has sketchy service history, or that's had ongoing problems the current owner is trying to offload, run away. These are not engines you want to inherit someone else's problems with. The cost to properly diagnose and repair issues on a V12 can run into thousands of dollars quickly, and that's not assuming parts are readily available. For new boat buyers, the V12 makes sense in specific situations. If you're buying a boat in the 45 to 55 foot range that would traditionally require 4 smaller outboards, going with 3 V12s gives you the same or better performance with less complexity, better fuel economy, and more space on the transom for swim platforms and other features. If you're buying a truly massive center console or cruiser, Quad V12s make you the king of the marina parking lot and deliver performance that was simply impossible 5 years ago. The Mercury V12 Verado represents a fundamental shift in what's possible with outboard power. We've gone from an era where 300 horsepower was considered huge to a world where 600 is the new benchmark. Boat designers are adapting with beefier transoms, upgraded fuel systems, and sophisticated electrical systems to handle the charging capabilities. The death of 7 Marine created a vacuum that Mercury filled perfectly, and it's basically their market to lose in the high horsepower segment now. What we're witnessing is outboards replacing inboards and stern drives on larger and larger boats. 20 years ago, a 50-foot boat with outboards would have been laughable. Today, it's becoming standard. The V12 accelerates that trend because you get legitimate yacht performance with the serviceability of outboards. No engine room needed, no through-hull cooling, tilt the engines up for maintenance or to reduce draft. When something breaks, swap the entire engine rather than tearing apart an engine room. So here's the verdict. The V12 is simultaneously the most impressive and most controversial outboard on the market. It delivers performance that wasn't possible before with genuinely innovative engineering and legitimate fuel economy numbers. But it's also complex, expensive, and new enough that long-term reliability remains unproven. Early recalls and owner issues suggest this isn't set-it-and-forget-it technology. Is it worth $77,000? If you're powering $1 million boat, absolutely. If you could get by with smaller engines, maybe not. What's undeniable is Mercury swung for the fences, built something that didn't exist, and created a milestone in marine propulsion. Whether it becomes a legend or a cautionary tale, time will tell. If you found this valuable, smash that subscribe button. Drop a comment. Should we compare the V12 with the Yamaha XTO? Share this with anyone running these engines. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the water.